Question 1. A project manager is conducting qualitative risk analysis and has identified several risks. Which of the following best describes the primary objective of this process? A. To numerically estimate the impact of risks on project objectives. B. To prioritize individual project risks for further analysis or response. C. To develop options and actions to reduce threats and enhance opportunities. D. To allocate contingency and management reserves to address identified risks. Answer: B. To prioritize individual project risks for further analysis or response. Qualitative risk analysis primarily involves assessing the probability of occurrence and potential impact of identified risks to determine their relative priority for the project. This process allows the project team to focus limited resources on the most significant risks by categorizing them using tools like a probability and impact matrix, without delving into detailed numerical computations. For instance, a risk deemed high probability and high impact would be prioritized over a low probability, low impact risk. Always remember that qualitative analysis is about ranking and prioritization, providing an initial filter before deeper dives. Question 2. During project execution, a known risk materializes and its effects are greater than anticipated, exceeding the allocated contingency reserves. What is the most appropriate next step for the project manager? A. Transfer the risk to an external third party. B. Update the risk register and continue project execution. C. Escalate the issue to senior management or the sponsor. D. Reevaluate all other project risks to free up more reserves. Answer: C. Escalate the issue to senior management or the sponsor. When a risk materializes and its impact exceeds the contingency reserves, it typically indicates a significant deviation from the project baseline and an unmanaged financial or resource need. Contingency reserves are for known risks, while management reserves are for unknown unknowns. Once contingency reserves are exhausted, the issue often becomes one that requires a decision and additional funding from higher authority. For example, if a key component fails and its replacement costs far more than budgeted, the project manager needs to escalate to the sponsor for additional management reserve allocation or a scope/budget adjustment. Always escalate when a situation is beyond the project manager's authorized authority or budget. Question 3. An Agile project team regularly conducts sprint reviews and retrospectives. How do these ceremonies inherently contribute to risk management? A. They ensure all identified risks are transferred to external vendors. B. They provide formal approval for the release of management reserves. C. They facilitate continuous inspection, adaptation, and early identification of emerging risks. D. They serve as a final approval gate for all risk mitigation strategies. Answer: C. They facilitate continuous inspection, adaptation, and early identification of emerging risks. In Agile methodologies, risk management is integrated throughout the project lifecycle rather than being a separate, distinct phase. Sprint reviews and retrospectives create frequent opportunities for the team and stakeholders to inspect the increment, discuss progress, identify impediments, and adapt the plan, thereby inherently reducing uncertainty and revealing new risks or changes in existing ones. For instance, during a sprint review, feedback from stakeholders might highlight a previously unrecognized technical challenge. This continuous feedback loop helps in proactive risk identification and response, embodying the Agile principle of embracing change. Question 4. A project manager is facilitating a brainstorming session with subject matter experts to identify potential risks. Which of the following is an input to this identify risks process? A. Risk register. B. Risk report. C. Project management plan. D. Change requests. Answer: C. Project management plan. The project management plan serves as a foundational input for the identify risks process because it contains crucial information about the project's scope, schedule, cost, quality, resources, and baselines. Understanding these planned aspects allows the team to identify deviations or uncertainties that could pose a risk to achieving project objectives. For example, reviewing the scope baseline helps in identifying risks related to scope creep or ambiguous requirements. Remember that comprehensive planning documents are essential guides for recognizing what could go wrong. Question 5. A project is facing a potential supply chain disruption due to a global event, which could delay critical material delivery. The project manager decides to order materials from 2 different suppliers in parallel, even though it increases initial costs. Which risk response strategy is being applied here? A. Accept. B. Avoid. C. Mitigate. D. Transfer. Answer: C. Mitigate. Mitigation is a risk response strategy that involves taking action to reduce the probability or impact of a threat to an acceptable threshold. In this scenario, ordering from 2 suppliers in parallel directly reduces the likelihood of a complete disruption and lessens the potential impact of a single supplier failing. While it incurs extra cost, this action aims to lessen the overall exposure to the supply chain risk, rather than eliminating it entirely, avoid, or shifting it to another party, transfer. Mitigating actions aim to make the risk less severe or less likely to occur. Question 6. A project manager has identified a new opportunity related to using a novel technology that could significantly reduce project duration and costs, but it also carries high uncertainty. The project sponsor, who has a high risk tolerance, encourages the team to invest in exploring this technology. Which risk response strategy is best reflected by the sponsor's directive? A. Exploit. B. Enhance. C. Share. D. Accept. Answer: A. Exploit. Exploit is a risk response strategy for opportunities that involves taking direct action to ensure the opportunity occurs and its benefits are realized. When the sponsor has a high-risk tolerance and directs the team to invest in and pursue a novel technology with potential significant benefits, they are actively trying to make the opportunity happen. For example, if a team discovers a new, more efficient coding algorithm, exploit would mean immediately allocating resources to implement it across the project. This strategy is about seizing the opportunity to ensure its occurrence, not just increasing its probability or impact. Question 7. A project team has conducted qualitative risk analysis and created a probability and impact matrix. What is the next logical step before proceeding to quantitative risk analysis or risk response planning for high-priority risks? A. Closing the project. B. Updating the project charter. C. Assigning risk owners. D. Performing risk audits. Answer: C. Assigning risk owners. After risks are prioritized during qualitative analysis, it is crucial to assign a specific individual or group as the risk owner for each significant risk. The risk owner is responsible for monitoring the risk, developing and implementing risk responses, and reporting on its status. This step ensures clear accountability and moves the risk from identification to active management, as a risk without an owner is often a risk that goes unmanaged. For example, for a technical design risk, the lead engineer might be assigned as the risk owner to ensure follow-through. Question 8. During risk monitoring and control, the project manager observes that a previously identified risk has a higher probability of occurring than originally estimated, but its potential impact remains the same. What should be the project manager's immediate action? A. Mark the risk as closed in the risk register. B. Reassess the risk's priority and update the risk register. C. Immediately invoke the contingency reserve for this risk. D. Ignore the change as the impact has not increased. Answer: B. Reassess the risk's priority and update the risk register. Risk management is an iterative process, and risks are dynamic. Their probability and impact can change over time. When a change in a risk's attributes, such as an increased probability, is observed, the project manager must reassess its overall priority and update the risk register to reflect the new information. This might lead to a different risk response strategy or a shift in focus, but simply ignoring the change is not prudent. For instance, if a key supplier's financial stability worsens, the risk of late delivery increases, requiring a re-evaluation of its status. Question 9. A project manager is determining the amount of contingency reserves needed for the project. Which of the following is a primary input to this decision? A. Management reserves. B. Risk register. C. Project charter. D. Enterprise environmental factors. Answer: B. Risk register. The risk register is a critical input for determining contingency reserves because it contains detailed information about identified individual project risks, including their assessed probability, impact, and planned responses. The sum of the potential impacts of identified risks, especially those for which mitigation or acceptance strategies are chosen, directly informs the amount of contingency reserve needed to cover their potential costs or schedule delays if they occur. For example, if 5 specific risks are identified with a collective potential impact of $50,000, that information helps to justify a portion of the contingency reserve. Question 10. A project team is developing a prototype for a new product, and the success of the project hinges on the feasibility of a complex technical component. To address this uncertainty, the team decides to conduct a proof-of-concept experiment. This approach is an example of which risk response strategy? A. Avoid. B. Exploit. C. Mitigate. D. Transfer. Answer: C. Mitigate. Conducting a proof-of-concept experiment is a classic example of a mitigation strategy for a technical risk. By performing the experiment, the project team actively reduces the uncertainty and, consequently, the probability of failure or the negative impact of the technical component not working as expected. This action aims to reduce the risk severity or likelihood to an acceptable level rather than eliminating the risk entirely, avoid, or shifting it to a third party, transfer. Mitigating actions often involve early testing or prototyping to gain knowledge and reduce uncertainty. Question 11. During a monthly risk review meeting, a project manager identifies a new risk that was previously unknown. This new risk is a direct result of implementing a previously planned risk response to an existing threat. What is this new risk called? A. Residual risk. B. Secondary risk. C. Accepted risk. D. Transferred risk. Answer: B. Secondary risk. A secondary risk is a new risk that arises as a direct result of implementing a risk response to an existing risk. While the primary risk response aims to address the original threat or opportunity, it can sometimes inadvertently create new uncertainties. For example, if a project decides to mitigate a schedule risk by outsourcing a task, the primary response, a secondary risk could be the loss of control over quality or communication with the new vendor. Project managers must anticipate and identify these potential side effects when planning risk responses. Question 12. A project manager uses a decision tree analysis to evaluate a complex scenario with multiple possible outcomes and their associated probabilities and impacts. Although calculations are involved, what is the primary purpose of using this technique in risk management? A. To determine the qualitative ranking of risks. B. To graphically represent and evaluate strategic options under uncertainty. C. To create a comprehensive list of all potential project risks. D. To formally close out the risk management process. Answer: B. To graphically represent and evaluate strategic options under uncertainty. Decision tree analysis is a quantitative risk analysis technique that allows the project manager to model various decision paths and their potential outcomes, including the probabilities and impacts of associated risks. Its primary purpose is to help evaluate different strategic choices when faced with uncertainty, allowing for a structured comparison of expected values and the identification of the most favorable path. For instance, a decision tree can help decide whether to invest in a new technology or stick with an old one by mapping out potential success/failure rates and financial returns. Question 13. A project team is brainstorming potential threats and opportunities that could impact their project. Which aspect of the assess risks performance domain does this activity primarily fall under? A. Risk response planning. B. Risk identification. C. Risk monitoring. D. Risk quantification. Answer: B. Risk identification. Brainstorming sessions where the project team actively thinks about and lists potential threats and opportunities are a core part of the Identify Risks process, which is a key component of the Assess Risks performance domain. This phase focuses on recognizing and documenting all possible uncertainties that could affect project objectives before analyzing or planning responses for them. The goal is to be exhaustive in compiling a comprehensive list of risks that might exist. Question 14. A project manager has identified that a critical team member might leave the project before completion, posing a significant threat. To address this, the project manager arranges for cross-training of other team members to cover the potential knowledge gap. This action is an example of which risk response strategy? A. Transfer. B. Avoid. C. Mitigate. D. Exploit. Answer: C. Mitigate. Cross-training team members in anticipation of a critical person's departure is a classic mitigation strategy. The project manager is taking proactive steps to reduce the potential negative impact, knowledge gap, project delay, if the threat materializes. It lessens the severity of the risk but doesn't eliminate the possibility of the team member leaving, avoid, nor does it shift the responsibility to a third party, transfer. Mitigation focuses on reducing either the probability or the impact of the risk. Question 15. The project manager observes that a project's technical performance is consistently below baseline expectations. This trend indicates a potential future problem or risk that needs to be addressed. This observation is an example of which type of input to risk monitoring and control. A. Organizational process assets. B. Work performance data. C. Agreements. D. Stakeholder register. Answer: B. Work performance data. Work performance data refers to raw observations and measurements collected during project execution, such as actual start/finish dates, percent complete, and technical performance measurements. When a project manager observes that technical performance is below baseline, this is raw work performance data that serves as an input to risk monitoring and control. This data is then analyzed, as work performance information, to identify variances and trends that might signal emerging risks or trigger existing risk responses. Always use real-time data to stay ahead of potential issues. Question 16. A project is developing a new software application, and a key feature relies on integrating with a third-party API that is still under development. To manage the risk of API delays, the project manager includes a contractual clause with the third party that penalizes them for late delivery. Which risk response strategy is being employed here? A. Mitigate. B. Avoid. C. Transfer. D. Accept. Answer: C. Transfer. Transferring a risk involves shifting the responsibility or impact of a threat to a third party, often through contracts, insurance, or warranties. In this scenario, the contractual penalty clause legally obligates the third-party vendor to bear the financial burden if the API delivery is delayed. This doesn't eliminate the risk of delay, avoid, or reduce its likelihood, mitigate. Instead, it shifts the financial consequences of that risk to another entity. Remember, transfer doesn't eliminate the risk, it just reassigns its ownership. Question 17. A project manager is conducting a risk audit. What is the primary purpose of a risk audit? A. To identify new risks that were not in the risk register. B. To determine if risk responses are being effectively implemented and are adequate. C. To calculate the expected monetary value, EMV, of identified risks. D. To officially close out the risk management process. Answer: B. To determine if risk responses are being effectively implemented and are adequate. A risk audit is a structured review of the effectiveness of the risk management process, including the efficiency of risk responses. Its primary purpose is to assess whether the planned risk responses are working as intended, if they are appropriate for the current project context, and if the overall risk management strategy is effective. For example, an audit might reveal that a specific mitigation plan isn't reducing the risk as expected. This helps ensure continuous improvement and adaptation of risk management activities throughout the project. Question 18. During a risk review, a project manager determines that the impact of a previously identified threat is so small that the project team will not take any proactive action, but will simply deal with it if it occurs. Which risk response strategy is this an example of? A. Transfer. B. Avoid. C. Mitigate. D. Accept. Answer: D. Accept. Risk acceptance is a strategy where the project team decides not to change the project plan to deal with a risk or decides they cannot identify any other suitable risk response strategy. This can be passive acceptance, no proactive action, or active acceptance, establishing a contingency plan. In this case, choosing to deal with the risk only if it occurs without prior action is passive acceptance, indicating the impact is deemed tolerable without specific intervention. Remember, acceptance is a valid strategy when the cost of response outweighs the potential impact of the risk. Question 19. An Agile team utilizes a Kanban board to visualize workflow and limit work in progress. How does this practice contribute to managing risk within an Agile context? A. It eliminates the need for a dedicated risk register. B. It prevents all scope changes throughout the project. C. It highlights bottlenecks and potential impediments early, indicating emerging risks. D. It provides a formal document for transferring risk ownership. Answer: C. It highlights bottlenecks and potential impediments early, indicating emerging risks. A Kanban board visually represents the flow of work, making bottlenecks, queues, and blocked items immediately apparent. By limiting work in progress, it forces the team to focus on completing tasks, thereby exposing issues and potential impediments sooner. These impediments are essentially emerging risks, such as resource contention or technical dependencies, that can then be addressed proactively before they escalate into major problems. For example, seeing too many items stuck in a testing column might indicate a capacity risk in the testing team. Question 20. A project manager wants to ensure that project objectives are protected against potential negative impacts. The project manager also seeks to capitalize on uncertain events that could benefit the project. This dual approach aligns with which concept in risk management? A. Focusing solely on threats. B. Separating issues from risks. C. Managing both threats and opportunities. D. Utilizing a single response strategy for all risks. Answer: C. Managing both threats and opportunities. Modern project risk management recognizes that risks encompass both threats, uncertainties with potential negative impacts, and opportunities, uncertainties with potential positive impacts. Effective risk management involves proactive planning and response to minimize the impact of threats while maximizing the likelihood and benefits of opportunities. For example, identifying a potential software bug, threat, and a chance to reuse a developed module in another project, opportunity, both fall under comprehensive risk management. A balanced approach to both sides of risk is key to project success. Question 21. A major stakeholder demands significant changes to the project scope late in the project lifecycle, which introduces new technical challenges and potential delays. The project manager evaluates these changes for their potential impact on cost, schedule, and quality. This process is part of which risk management activity? A. Risk identification. B. Risk monitoring and control. C. Risk response planning. D. Qualitative risk analysis. Answer: B. Risk monitoring and control. When new demands or changes arise during project execution, they need to be continually assessed for new risks or changes to existing risks. This activity falls under risk monitoring and control, which involves tracking identified risks, monitoring residual risks, identifying new risks, executing risk response plans, and evaluating their effectiveness throughout the project lifecycle. Evaluating the new technical challenges and potential delays from a late scope change is an ongoing monitoring activity to ensure the project stays on track. Question 22. A project is experiencing unexpected technical issues that are causing delays. The project manager investigates these issues to understand their root causes and then implements corrective actions. These actions are part of which aspect of risk management? A. Risk identification. B. Risk auditing. C. Risk response implementation. D. Risk register creation. Answer: C. Risk response implementation. Once risks have materialized or are imminent, and a response plan has been developed, the actual execution of those planned actions is known as risk response implementation. In this scenario, investigating root causes and implementing corrective actions are the practical steps taken to address the technical issues, which are the materialized risks. For example, if a software module is consistently failing, the response might be to re-engineer a part of the code, and implementing that re-engineering is the response in action. Question 23. The project manager wants to ensure that all relevant stakeholders are involved in identifying risks from various perspectives. Which risk identification technique would be most effective for this purpose? A. Checklists. B. Root cause analysis. C. Brainstorming. D. Expert judgment. Answer: C. Brainstorming. Brainstorming is an excellent technique for risk identification because it encourages a free flow of ideas from all participants, allowing for a wide range of perspectives on potential threats and opportunities. By involving diverse stakeholders, the project manager can leverage their unique experiences and insights to uncover risks that might otherwise be overlooked, fostering a comprehensive risk list. For instance, involving legal, technical, and marketing stakeholders in a brainstorming session ensures a holistic view of project risks. Question 24. A project manager is reviewing the risk breakdown structure, RBS, for an upcoming project. What is the primary benefit of using an RBS? A. It lists all identified risks in a chronological order. B. It provides a hierarchical representation of risks, categorizing them by type. C. It documents the probability and impact of each risk. D. It outlines the specific response strategies for each risk. Answer: B. It provides a hierarchical representation of risks, categorizing them by type. The risk breakdown structure, RBS, is a hierarchical representation of identified risks, organized by category and subcategory. Its primary benefit is to help the project team systematically identify and categorize risks, ensuring that various sources of risk are considered. For example, an RBS might categorize risks as technical, external, organizational, or project management, with further subcategories under each. This structured approach helps ensure thoroughness in risk identification and provides a framework for understanding risk exposure. Question 25. A project is in its early stages, and there is significant uncertainty regarding the final product design due to evolving customer requirements. To account for this, the project manager allocates a portion of the project budget specifically for unknown risks that may arise later. What is this allocation called? A. Contingency reserve. B. Management reserve. C. Activity reserve. D. Schedule reserve. Answer: B. Management reserve. Management reserves are budget or schedule allocations held for unknown risks, meaning those risks that have not been identified and therefore cannot be planned for directly. They are controlled by senior management or the project sponsor, not the project manager, and are used to address unforeseen events that emerge during the project. For instance, if a completely new government regulation is introduced, requiring a fundamental design change, management reserve might be used. Remember, management reserves are for the truly unexpected, providing a buffer against unforeseen circumstances.